This is a heavyweight fight. This is one of the greatest divisional round games. I wish these two teams played in different conferences. This would be a Super Bowl. This would be the Super Bowl that I'd want to see.
Man, what a fun wild card weekend is in our rearview mirror. The games might have not been sexy, but it delivers us the teams that I think we needed to see in this divisional round. And now the football is, I think, going to be fantastic the rest of the way. At least I certainly hope it is. We always get a road upset. Somebody in this round goes on the road and wins a game that a lot of people say this week they won't, but it happens. In your mind, where is it most likely to happen? At Arrowhead between the Texans and the Chiefs? In Detroit between the Commanders and the Lions? You going to go to Philadelphia for your Rams going in to upset the Eagles? Or in Buffalo and Lamar and the Ravens get to the AFC title game once again? Where's the road upset happening in the divisional?
Well, what's unique about this is that Baltimore just became a favorite in Buffalo, which tells you a lot. So for Baltimore to be a favorite from Vegas perspective by a point or a point and a half, whatever it is, that's surprising to me. I thought Buffalo, that's where you would think that if Buffalo was a point or 2 point favorite, maybe Baltimore could win the game. So as a road team, I think Baltimore has the best chance, but keep an eye on Philadelphia getting upset here, because the way the Rams looked on Monday night, and you watch a lot of Rams, they play the Niners. That's a rival. This job that Sean Payton did, going from 1-4 to the playoffs to winning the division, they destroyed the Vikings, a very good team, in the first half of that game. That's a rare playoff game that was over at halftime. Shocking to me, and they looked fantastic. Their 15 scripted plays were beautiful. Their defensive pass rush, oh my God, I got to start talking Niners defensive front now with Rams. Rams looked that good. And then Sam Darnold and Kevin O'Connell had no adjustments in the third quarter, basically put up the white flag. So I think the Rams are a really good live dog.
So if I could brainwash everybody, forget everything you know about the NFL, just watch last wild card weekend, I think most people would say, hey, I think the Rams are the team to beat. No one was talking about that before they played that game against Minnesota. They passed the eye test. Whatever that means in the wild card round, I think they might be the most likely to go into an environment. Philadelphia, I don't care, man. A.J. Brown reading that book on the sideline, that's not good news. You got somebody reading a book on the sideline, that is an FU to the coaching staff in one way. I see a united Rams team playing behind a defense nobody saw coming, maybe going in and getting a win in Philadelphia. I think the Eagles have had a great year. Sirianni has kept them together somehow, some way. But, you know, you brought up the fact that the Ravens are a little bit of a favorite here. I know it's a regular season vote. To me, if you're voting for MVP and your vote is either going to Allen or Lamar, you shouldn't have to cast that vote until this game happens. Like, this should decide that. If it's really going to be between the two of them, this has got to be the game that decides it.
This is one of the greatest MVP votes I've ever experienced in my career, 30 years almost on the radio. I'm sure there were close ones in the past. You know, Rodgers had one blowout years, Brady, Peyton Manning. This, Sam Darnold at 14-3, and the stats he put up were spectacular. Saquon Barkley had an amazing year. He should have broke the record. I would have let him play one more game and break that record. Joe Burrow, I don't believe you have to be on a winning team to win the MVP. To me, the MVP in every sport, baseball, football, NBA, is stats. And hard to argue Burrow's stats. But Lamar's stats are unbelievable. You're talking over 4,000 yards and the 800 rushing yards. Never been done before. So if we don't give the MVP to Lamar, we're not giving the MVP to a guy who did something that all the MVP quarterbacks before him never could do, and we're going to leave him out of this one. And then I think, Damon, Josh Allen's going to win. I think he's going to get it because of rushing touchdowns. His rushing touchdowns were far more than Lamar Jackson, a running quarterback. So you're right. This is a heavyweight fight. This is one of the greatest divisional round games. I wish these two teams played in different conferences. This would be a Super Bowl. This would be the Super Bowl that I'd want to see, let alone an AFC championship. The only bummed out thing about this is whoever loses the game is going to be beat up, playing in Orchard Park in the cold, and have to go to most likely Arrowhead and play Kansas City. And I think Kansas City's probably going to beat Houston and be lying in wait for one of those banged up teams.
It's funny. Last year, everyone was talking about how CJ Stroud was the next best thing. And then Jaden Daniels turned into the next best thing as Stroud had a difficult year in his sophomore season behind a banged up offensive line, injuries to Nico Collins and Tank Dell kind of changed the Texans' fortunes, but then their defense decided to carry the conversation. Look, they got a puncher's chance going into Arrowhead, but it's the Chiefs until it ain't, right? I mean, it really is. They're trying to get their 7th straight AFC title game. JT, we're just talking about the great MVP debate. To me, Mahomes is like Michael Jordan in the argument that any year he's in the league, he's your MVP. I don't know what stats are. Nobody means more to a winning formula than Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. A 7th straight AFC title game is where they're looking to take this thing and win a 3rd straight Super Bowl. And I think they're going to do that until they don't. I am a doubting. You're going to have to kill the Chiefs for me to think Frankenstein ain't coming.
Yeah, well, last year the Chiefs had to go on the road, and they were susceptible to losing, and they've won in Baltimore. If you look at how they won against Buffalo, what they were able to do, they had the tough road last year. This team, to me, is significantly worse. And I mean worse. It's tough to say. This team, Damon, I've been saying on all my platforms, if they win the Super Bowl, they are the greatest team of all time, ever. That'll be a three-peat. It's never been done. They'll be doing it in the salary cap era. This puts them ahead of the Lombardi Packers, the Shula 72 team, any of Brady's dynasties, Montana. I think the closest team I would compare it to would be Dallas winning 3 out of 4. So they didn't win 3 in a row, but they won 3 out of 4 in dominant fashion. So someone's got to knock them off. I'm out here in the AFC West. We're in the NFC West. We need this team to lose. And they probably should have lost 4 to 5 games in the regular season if it wasn't for the doink, the toe out of bounds, a bunch of bizarre finishes. So I think they're susceptible to be beat. I think the team that will probably beat them in Arrowhead is Baltimore. I think Lamar could have that Superman put on the cape game. Josh Allen's been close. He had the game with 13 seconds. He's proven he can win there. I just don't like Buffalo's wide receiver talent compared to what they had 2-3 years ago to what they have now to go into Kansas City. But I hope Kansas City gets beaten. I don't think Houston's going to do it.
I think for the first time ever, I don't know if it still exists but it happened earlier this week. The Detroit Lions were the favorite to win the Super Bowl. That had never happened in the history of Las Vegas. We've had this entire conversation about what we think the divisional round looks like, and we haven't even talked about the Detroit Lions. They're one of the great stories in the NFL this year. You got to love Dan Campbell. You got to love a team that really spits on its own injury report. The fact that they have reached where they have gotten to with all the injuries that have mounted, it's really amazing when you talk about a sexy Super Bowl Sunday. Could you imagine if you were waking up on Super Bowl Sunday and either the Bills or Lions were about to win one of these bad boys? That would be incredible if that were to happen. What do you think, Lions and Commanders? We haven't talked about it at all. It's a monster.
Yeah, Lions were my preseason pick to win the Super Bowl. I had them all year, and the injuries that they went through are incredible because being out here in Vegas with the Raiders were number 2 in players on IR and games missed to the Lions, who were 1. And the Raiders had a really bad year, completely upside down year because they had all these injuries, and the Lions had more, and they're still, I think, going to win the Super Bowl. So if we have Detroit and Buffalo in the Super Bowl, they could not stock enough beer in New Orleans for that game. Everybody who doesn't have a room, everybody who doesn't know where to stay, they won't care. They'll be sleeping in the parks like the Eagles fans did in Jacksonville a couple decades ago when I was there. So I would like to see for Detroit to play San Francisco in that last game, which you're very aware of. Great work by you and your analysis. They had a lot to play for, even though the Niners didn't. They went in there and they had to win that game. Then they get Minnesota, who's playing for the 1 seed. And the final 10 minutes of that game, I saw the worst body language I've saw this year by any team. The Vikings were looking around like they saw a ghost. They put them down. And now Detroit's got that bye week, and they're getting 2 of their players who are out most of the year back. I don't want to say they're unbeatable because they are beatable, but if they get that home field advantage and they don't screw it up in this round, I don't see them getting beat. I see them winning the NFC and going to the Super Bowl.
The divisional should be great. It really, really should be. Looking still, though, back on some of the wreckage of Wild Card Weekend. To me, there is a situation that is just one of the more unique situations. You mentioned what a great year Sam Darnold legitimately had right up until the two biggest games of the season. And it was bad. It wasn't just subpar from Darnold. It was bad, obviously. Now, a lot of quarterbacks will be bad when they're getting sacked 9 times, but it went bad. It all went bad for the Vikings. And Darnold has tens of millions of dollars now left on the table because of those performances. What do you think happens next with Sam Darnold?
Yeah.
There will be teams who are interested in him, maybe the Raiders even interested in him, but the big bag, it ain't as big as it might have been, could have been. I don't think there's a bigger loser in terms of your regular season perception and how it ended in the playoffs for you than poor Sam Darnold.
Yeah, it's a really good point here because I think he did enough to secure the bag. 14-3 and putting up MVP numbers. Not a guy who won a lot of games and just managed games. We're talking about a guy who dominated in the stat sheet. So I thought before the playoffs started, he probably guaranteed his money. But it's a topic I'll throw back with you after my comment on Brock Purdy and what he's worth. Darnold, I'm not giving Darnold $50 million, but I'm giving him 40. Like if you told me he was the quarterback of the Raiders on a 3-year deal, $120 million, 40 a year with $100 million guaranteed, I'd do that tomorrow, even though the Raiders want to get a draft pick and they want to get a quarterback to develop. You look at what Darnold did all year. What helped Darnold out, Damon, after he train wrecked with the Jets and obviously with the Carolina Panthers, working under Kyle Shanahan and then Kevin O'Connell back-to-back, that was like going to Harvard and Princeton. It truly was. So what he learned, and as he went back into the quarterback meat grinder and came out of it as this new guy, he's going to get the money. But to your point exactly, how much do you give him? Daniel Jones got $40 million. He was a disaster. Baker Mayfield got $30 million a year. That deal was on the table for everybody, and no one believed in Baker. So I look at the deal the same as Baker. Tampa got a deal with Baker at $30 million. I don't think you're going to get a deal with Darnold. I think the minimum is $40 million. And if an owner wants to pay him $45 million, I think he's going to get it.
I think if Brock and Team Brock want to get rough and push it to close to 60, they'll get there. I hope it comes in mid-50s. It would be great for the Niners if it was low 50s, but Purdy's about to get paid, JT.
I know he is, but we have got to stop this insanity because he's playing well on a great team, and that gives him an unfair advantage.
They weren't great this year, man. And out around them, they weren't.
Yeah, but I think the Niners season was train wrecked due to injuries. Again, there are a couple of years you have throwout statistics. When you get blasted with the injuries that they had, I think that's a big part of what happened. You don't have Ayuk and McCaffrey. I throw out this year. But what do you want to give Purdy? Mr. Irrelevant, last pick in the draft, plays well on a really good team, manages the game good. Why can't the Niners offer him 50? Why does it have to be 60, 55, 58? No, he's your guy. You can franchise tag him. You control the opportunity with him going forward. Well, not to tag him. I think you're going to pay him because he deserves to get paid. But why do you have to go to the top? I mean, do you think a lot of other teams around the league, if they had the chance, would give Brock Purdy $55 million? I don't see one team in this entire league that would give Brock Purdy $55 million.
That's market rate for a 24-year-old with 4 playoff wins under his belt, numbers that say even though, I mean, at some point, and I agree with you, man, in many ways I really do, but at some point you're no longer the prospect, you're the player. Yep. And that player on the market with his numbers just coming to marketplace gets paid. It does. The cap needs to go up, but the NFL does need to address this. We cannot have a billionaire quarterback class and a millionaire everybody else rest of class. It's going to screw up teams and rosters, not just in San Francisco, but in a lot of places. You know who definitely should send Sam Darnold a muffin basket? because Darnold has taken all the heat in the world off of him, or maybe that's just the nice life to live when you're a quarterback of the Los Angeles Chargers and no one really cares about you outside of the outrage of one day a news cycle. Justin Herbert, again, is a guy who is making $60 million a year. There's no doubt he's one of the great prospects of all time. If Hollywood sent down a central casting booking to play the role of quarterback in the movie NFL, it would look a lot like Justin Herbert. 4 interceptions, no playoff wins. That guy is out of the news cycle instantly. Had that happened to a quarterback in New York, in Chicago, in Philadelphia, they'd be murdering him. Justin Herbert, it's a good life to live when you play for a team no one really cares about, I guess.
Yeah, last point you made is the key. He doesn't have any media attention on him. None. I mean, they're the 7th team in Southern California. But I'll tell you this about Herbert. I'll share this with everybody. I've seen them all play live. Montana, Young, Marino, Elway live. I've seen them all. Brady, Mahomes. Herbert is one of the greatest talents I've ever seen live. I was at a Raider game in Vegas, and my seats were, pretty good down low, and I'm at the 25-yard line. And he fades back to the 27. And he throws the ball to the back of the end zone. So it's right in front of me. And I'm watching the ball travel. There were 2 defenders that were inches away from him, the receiver, not a foot. They couldn't get their hands up quick enough, and the ball was there. And I said, wait a second. I've got to see that. And I've looked back at the video. His arm talent is at the level of Marino and Elway. I don't judge a guy long-term on his first 2 playoff games. It's ugly, man. Dan Marino went to the Super Bowl his rookie year, never went back. He's one of the greats of all time, could play in any era, but you're on to something. Herbert is not Mr. Clutch. And the Chargers this year did something unique. Harbaugh came in, they wanted to change the culture. They did. Brandon Staley was a train wreck. They wanted to run the ball first and throw second, and they did. But came back to haunt them. That's a throwing quarterback. Don't you reinvent that guy and hand it off as much as they did. So they needed him to throw in the biggest game, and it wasn't right because they wanted to run it and be balanced all year. It worked for Harbaugh. It came back to bite him in the ass in the playoffs in the wild card round at Houston.
Thanks for watching. Tune into the Damon Bruce Show live on YouTube every weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific.